Well, hi there. Welcome once again to Unstoppable Mindset, where inclusion, diversity, and the unexpected meet. And today we are absolutely dealing with unexpected. I'm your host, Mike Hinkson, but I'm not doing the interview today. I get to be interviewed, and you'll find out why all that is in just a moment. Our guest interviewer is Braden Ricketts, who is part of the team that helps me in the back deal with podcast editing and so on. He doesn't mostly do ours, but he's involved with what we do. And I even got him to commit once, and he still hasn't done it yet, but I got him to commit to letting me do a podcast interview with him. So we'll get to that. But today we have something special and a little bit more unexpected and unusual to talk about. So, Braden, I'm going to turn this over to you, and thank you for being here and welcome to Unstoppable Mindset.
Michael, it's an absolute honor for me to be here for very many reasons today, especially. You're a legend on the back end at Amplify U. We talk about you all the time. You're such a force to be reckoned with, and I'm honored to be on your show with you today.
Well, it's an honor to have you here being a part of this too.
Thank you. And speaking of honor, today we're going to talk about a very special person whose life has come to an abrupt end. And we want to spend some time today to revisit your wife, Karen, and what she meant to you in your world and how you were processing her loss.
Well, thank you. Yeah, we lost her on November 12th of 2022. And in a way, it was expected to some degree and wasn't really totally expected. She contracted a wound on her backside in July of 2022 that went all the way to the bone, and she ended up being in the hospital for a month and came back very much weaker. She also had rheumatoid arthritis, which she's had for several years, and she took medications for it. They were infused every month, and the doctors, the physicians felt that she could not take the infusions while she had this wound, as I said, that went to the bone, because the infusions would further lower her immune system's ability to fight infection. And the wound that she had got infected to the bone. So they didn't want her to have any of the infusions, which caused her a lot of pain. And I think other things were going on with her in general. And so from the time she got home in late August until November, she just kept getting weaker and she wasn't eating much. And we were all concerned and we were afraid of what was going on. And she was too. She was in a lot of pain. But then on November 12th, it finally kind of all caught up to her and came to a head. And at 11:25, I remember the time well, in the morning, she passed. So it is what we have to deal with. Fortunately, I was there with her. Her sister was there. Our niece was there. And three other people were there. Her two caregivers, Josie and Dolores, were there. And Jeanette, who is our housekeeper, who comes in once a week. Karen and I, between us, don't vacuum as well as one would like. So we cheat. We get somebody else to do it. And Jeanette wanted to be there as well. So we all were there when we got to say goodbye to Karen, which we're very grateful about. And, as I can only say, the spirit just moves faster than the body. And that's what happened.
Yeah. And not often do people have the opportunity to really say those goodbyes. So what a benefit to at least know and have the opportunity to bring people together around the unfortunate events.
Well, it was very fortunate to be able to do that. And I'm glad they were all there. They wanted to be there. And we had the opportunity. And for me, Karen's still here. A lot of people say that about loved ones and so on, but it's different. We would have been married 40 years on November 27th. So we missed 40 years by 15 days. So as far as I'm concerned, Karen will always be here in one way or another. And I started a few times after she passed by saying, we have to move on. And I realized, wrong thing to say. We don't move on. We move forward. But I don't want to move on, which I think almost implies eventually just leaving her behind. And we're not going to do that. I move forward, and she is where she is, but she will always be with me and will always be part of my memory and the memory of all of the people in our families. And, the other thing that happened for me the day after she passed, I put a note up on Facebook just telling people about it because I knew a lot of people who had known Karen or knew about her. And a number of people who read the Facebook post had never met Karen, but they read our book, Thunderdog, the story of a blind man and his guide dog and the triumph of trust, which was our New York Times bestseller book. And they wrote to me on Facebook and they said, we never met Karen, but we really got to know her in Thunderdog. And so one of the things that we're going to do is hold a Zoom session on the 28th of January at 11 a.m. Pacific time for anyone who wants to come and listen or participate. Our pastor from our church in San Marcos, California, where we lived in the early 90s, is going to be there. And David McKinney, my web guy, who's also a pastor in San Francisco, is going to be there. And anyone who wants to come is welcome to come and participate however they'd like. And the reason we're doing that in part is that Karen did not want a large service. Her mother died in 2021. We had a good service. It was a large service, but it was just too sad for Karen. And so she said if anytime she passed, she didn't want a large service. So this past Saturday, we held a small family service for her, just close members of the family and so on. And we did it at the church where her mom is buried. And we actually put Karen's ashes in with her mom. So the two of them are together because they were extremely close and we would want to honor that. And so we did.
I love that. And I love the sentiment of moving forward, not moving on. It's about developing a new relationship with that individual in a different form.
That's a good point, and you're absolutely right. That's exactly what it is.
Yeah. Michael, I also didn't get to know Karen very well. Would you like sharing a little bit about who she was in your words?
So Karen was born in 1949 and was a paraplegic from birth. So she always used a wheelchair. I think she actually got her first chair at the age of 5 that she started to grow up in, but she was always in a chair. And her parents were very much the same as mine in that they took the position that it didn't matter that we were different. What mattered was what we learned to do and what we decided to do with our own lives. And they gave her the opportunity and challenged her to take the opportunity to do whatever she wanted to do. So she went to regular school. There were physical challenges because a lot of times there were steps and other things. And so she had help with that. She took, like I did, although I only had it for 1 year, but she was in a special PE class. And they didn't do anything in the special PE class. She played cards with another person who she developed a very close friendship with in high school. And Marie and Karen were friends for for Marie's entire life. She passed in, I think it was early 2021. I think that, because COVID was with us. So, and then of course, Karen passed at the end of 2022. So they're probably up there laughing at us anyway, but
playing cards.
Yeah, playing cards. Yeah, absolutely. But Karen went to college at University of California, Riverside, and again, found physical barriers to getting around. And so she started to work to get Riverside to deal with it and actually became part of the committee dealing with the International Year of the Disabled that the United Nations in part sponsored, but at Riverside and so on, she became very involved in that and brought about a significant amount of change. She was also very active in Campus Crusade for Christ and then the United Methodist Church. We got married at the United Methodist Church, Irvine University Methodist Church in 1972. But she was very active in church. When I met her in 1982, she had been a teacher for 10 years and decided to move on to doing something else. She did have her master's degree in sociology and taught from that. And again, helped to break down barriers, but she decided to do something else. And so along the way, she decided to do the work of being a travel agent, which was a part-time thing and then became a full-time thing for her. And so when I met her, she worked at a travel agency in San Juan Capistrano, California. And within that agency, she started her own small agency dealing with travel for persons with disabilities. The name of the agency was Anyone Can Travel. And I met her through someone who knew her, who was out surveying some possible places for a convention for the Society for the Advancement of Travel and the Handicapped, SATH. And so they introduced me to Karen, and we kind of hit it off in January, although we didn't really have a whole lot to do with each other for a few months because I was dating someone and she was dating someone, and neither of those relationships lasted overly long. And then in May of 1982, Karen, I knew was agenting, and I was working for Kurzweil Computer Products, which was the company that Ray Kurzweil began to develop the reading machine for the blind. It was being purchased by Xerox. So I was based out here in California and needed to go see some customers in Hawaii. What a tough job to do. And I decided I'd take my parents because they had never been. And I called Karen to do the ticket booking, and she did. And then she brought the tickets down, and we chatted for a while. What I didn't know at the time was she was hoping that I'd ask her to go to lunch. And being shy, I didn't. But I walked her out to her car and helped her get in and put the chair in. I just leaned over and gave her a big kiss before she left. And then that Wednesday, I was going up to the airport to meet my parents. We were staying at a hotel overnight and leaving early the next day. She said, "I'm going to come and get you." Well, she did, and she came down, got me. We went up, and she met my parents. And the next day, we went to Hawaii, and I started calling her twice a day from Hawaii, which is kind of where everything really clicked. And then I came back, and the day I came back from Hawaii, she was leaving for some training on some computer systems for TWA, which was around at that time in Kansas City. So we didn't get to see each other from the time I left for Hawaii until 4 days after she got back, or rather until 4 days after I got back, and then she finally returned. We just clicked. And so in mid-July of 1982, I asked her to marry me, and we chose a ring. And one of the neat stories I could tell about the ring is that when the jeweler called and said it was ready, because we had it made, of course, I went up and got it and brought it down, not without telling her, but I had called her boss, lady named Joe, and I told Joe I was going to come and give Karen a ring. Joe will do anything for a party. So she immediately got champagne in the office, didn't tell Karen, but other people found out what was going on, which was great. So I show up around 3 p.m, and it was a Friday, I think. And Karen was on the phone, and I was sitting in front of her desk and just waiting. And finally, she kept talking to this client. And I just finally said, "Hey, give me your left hand a second. I want to hold your hand." And so she stuck her left hand out, and I put a ring on it. I put a ring on her finger, and she immediately said, "I have to hang up. My fiance just put my engagement ring on my finger. He proposed, so I have to go." And she did. And then the next few months went by, and we got married, as I said, on November 27th, 1982. She was and always has been a fun person, and I think in a lot of ways, very seriously, she was smarter than I was. She didn't always show it, but she had a great sense of humor, and when something popped out that was funny, it really popped out. And she also was very perceptive, and so the two of us, I think, really worked well together for 40 years.
40 years, my goodness.
Yeah.
What were some of the lessons you learned from 40 years of marriage with Karen?
That people can get along. We can fight. We did have sometimes they were pretty serious fights. I remember when working for one company in the early 90s, in 1996, early in 1996, we had talked about relocating to Washington, D.C. area. The company wanted to open an office there. And so the president said, "We want you to move there." And then one day, and we were both excited about that. And one day he comes into the office. He said, "I changed my mind. I want you to open an office in New York." Karen absolutely didn't want to go to New York. She didn't want to do anything there. DC was a lot more fun, I think, and a lot more interesting to her. But it was either take that job or a sales territory in a place like New Mexico, because he said, "I already have somebody who will take your place out here working at the company. We need you back there." So we had to do it. Karen didn't want to do it, but I went back. We rented an apartment, and we had some pretty heavy conversations on the phone, but we worked through it because there wasn't another viable job. And one of the things that I and anyone who happens to be fortunate enough to have a job, who happens to also be a person with a disability, knows the unemployment rate is really high for us. It's between 60 and 70% of all employable, in my case, blind people, are unemployed because people think we can't work, not that we really can't work. And so the result of that was that I didn't want to go into a job search. So we worked through it. And if you communicate, if you keep talking, if you work together and are willing to work together, you can get through stuff. And we did move to New Jersey. We both agreed we didn't want to stay there forever. We didn't know when we would move back to California, but Karen was a native. She wouldn't let me call myself a native because I was born in Chicago and moved to California when I was 5, so I could never be a native. But she always wanted to get back to California, and she said, "I'll do it if we're going to come back someday." And I said, "Hey, I am absolutely in sync with that." Then these two teams of terrorists hijacked a couple of airplanes and flew them into the towers of the World Trade Center, and that led to all the circumstances that did get us the opportunity to move back to California, which we did. And when we moved to New Jersey, we built a home because we wanted it to be wheelchair accessible. And the other issue there was it had to be a 2-story home because the development where we found property to build had only 2-story homes. So we put an elevator in. That was a fun thing. There were some challenges with the engineers in Westfield, New Jersey, where we lived, that they tried to make it difficult for us to do it, but we got the elevator in and we got them to sign off on it. When we moved back to California, we found a place to live up near Guide Dogs for the Blind Guide Dogs is in San Rafael. We bought a home in Novato. There's no property to build a home, so we had to buy one and modify it. We always said that if we could build a home, we wanted to do it because if you build a home from scratch, it's cheaper than if you buy a home and modify it. Because if you buy a home, then you got to tear things out, put things in, make changes, and it cost over $100,000 to do. But we did and loved the area up there. And then for a variety of things, we moved down here to Southern California in 2014, where again, we built a home and we made it a home. The home was built in 2016 and we moved in on December 17th, 2016. And we love it because, first of all, it's a brand new home with all the latest codes. The heating and air conditioning bills are a lot less than they might otherwise be. We do have solar. And it was comfortable for Karen. And it was comfortable for me. So one of the things I plan on doing is staying right here. Why would I want to move? It's too stressful to move, and we've got a good interest rate. And I'm hoping people will continue to hire me to speak. I also work for Accessiby, which is a company that makes products that help make internet websites more accessible and inclusive for persons with disabilities. So that is actually how this podcast, Unstoppable Mindset, began, because they wanted us to do a podcast that would tell the world that we're all capable, we're all unstoppable. And so we inspire people. Sometimes we talk about Accessiby and the products and the company, and we just talk about disabilities, but mostly it's all about inspiration. So between Accessiby and continuing to speak, I intend to keep busy and keep moving forward.
Absolutely. And you should. But it sounds like you and Karen had a life full of adventure together and a wonderful time.
Well, I think so. I've always regarded life as an adventure. I think probably I have been a little bit more of a risk taker than she wanted to be at times.
Mm-hmm.
But we did travel to various places. We were on a number of cruises, which was fun. We went with Karen's parents to a couple of timeshares in Spain during the World Expo back in 1992 and had a wonderful time for a couple of weeks over there. And mostly, I think the important thing, and it goes back to the question you asked before, is we made sure we always enjoyed each other's company. And I wouldn't change the last 40 years for anything. I hope along the way I learned stuff and then that she learned things as well. And we continued to be very close. We communicated. And over the past few months of her life, I know there were times that she said she was scared about what was happening. And I and her caregivers, Josie and Dolores, worked with her, and Courtney before them worked with her. And we just tried to keep things as pleasant as we could and as peaceful as we could. So I think eventually Karen knew that this was what she needed to do, was to move on, and she did. Well, and to go do something else. And whatever it is she's doing, I'm hoping that she's enjoying it, and I get to join her sometime in the future, um, or see the results of what she does somehow.
Yeah. Now, Michael, you've been processing this loss for, in anticipation leading up to the day, but also a few months since then. How have you been addressing the fear and the loss, and what are your plans for moving forward?
Thanks for asking that, for a lot of reasons, because one of the things that I realized as the pandemic began is that I had talked a lot in the speeches that I've given about my experiences in the World Trade Center and why I wasn't afraid, but I've never taught people how to deal with that. I've never taught people how they can learn to control their own fears and use fear as a positive force to move forward. And so now I have to practice what I preach, right? Well, I've had to do that before, but now I have to do it again. And you're right, there is fear. There is the fact that I've had a little bit of time to adjust, or I had time before she passed, and I was doing a lot of the cooking and a lot of the other things around the house that she wasn't able to do, although I kept hoping she would get better and be able to take over those things. But I also realized that if the worst, or what we didn't want to happen, actually did happen, I would have to continue to function and move forward. As a blind person who has been blind his entire life, I've learned that there are lots of ways of getting jobs accomplished, and I need to keep my wits about me, even though I'm going to have some fear and some frustrations along the way. I need to keep thinking about how to deal with different tasks. And fortunately, now we do have a lot more technology than we used to that helps the process. For example, there's a company that I help bring the products to market from called Aira, AIRA. And Aira is a company that makes what's called a visual interpreter. What it essentially translates to is a product that includes an app that will go on a smartphone. And you can activate the app that calls an Aira agent. Now, the agents are not just people who say, I want a job and pay me for it, but they are people who've demonstrated the ability to describe, to be accurate in their descriptions, and to understand what any of us who happen to be blind need when we ask a question. Like if I want a label read, I can tell them what I want, or if I do it enough times, people take notes in my profile so they know what to read and what I'm not interested in. Or if I'm traveling somewhere and need to get directions how to get from Virgil's Barbecue, for example, in New York City, to the United Nations, what the easiest ways to do it are. And literally what they do is they use the camera on the smartphone, or they can even use GPS information that's transmitted by the phone through the app, and they can give me whatever information I need to have. They describe, they don't editorialize, they don't tell me how to do things. They describe or give me the information I ask for. So when I was assembling something a few years ago, they read the instructions. They don't try to tell me things that you wouldn't want somebody to tell you. Now you got a blade screwdriver and a Phillips screwdriver. Do you know the difference? And that's not the thing you want to tell me if you want to describe it. You want to tell me the instructions say that you need to use the blade screwdriver to tighten these screws, or you need to use this particular pipe. We were building a laundry cart and everything was color coded. So they tell me the specific information that I visually would not have access to. Well, as I said, we brought that to market, and I use Aira all the time now, whether it is to read labels, whether it's to get other information sometimes off of a TV screen, whether it's to read material that my the computer won't scan or read very well, or whatever it happens to be. They they literally can provide any visual information I need. That didn't exist 7 years ago, but it exists today. And so that's something that certainly helps. And there are other kinds of technologies. There's much better optical character recognition than with the original Kurzweil reading machine. And so I've given you a long explanation, but it's to say, knowing all of that and knowing how to use the tools that I have, and knowing that I can be creative when I need to and maybe use tools in a different way than people are possibly not used to, ultimately, I can continue to move forward and do whatever it is that I want to do. Does that mean I miss Karen less? No, it doesn't. But it does mean that I can continue to live, which she would want me to do. I can continue to go to the airport, get on airplanes, and go do speeches, which I do, and continue to talk about the lessons we should learn from September 11th, and now start to talk about how you can learn to control your fear. And I can speak to that more poignantly now than ever because it's something that I have to do every day. It was weird going to sleep the first night that Karen wasn't here, even when she went into the hospital, although I knew she would probably be coming back, and she did. But it was weird going to sleep and it was only me in the house. And then when she did pass, again, it was a strange feeling. And I'm not sure that I'm still used to it, but I'm comfortable enough to recognize that, again, what I need to do is to move forward and not be afraid, or use the fear that I do have to help me be motivated to move on and do whatever I need to do, including doing this interview.
You know, you are absolutely embodying the unstoppable mindset that you have brought to the world through your podcast and your stories, because this is something that happens to a lot of people, but it's also seen as, you know, the reason people give up or the reason that people struggle with a loss. And what I'm hearing from you, Michael, is that you're taking this opportunity as a new adventure. You're going to try to do things in different ways or learn how to do things more on your own that you may not have done before.
Right.
And that can be scary for a lot of people. But in your explanation, I hear that there's a little bit of, you know, excitement for what you're going to learn and what you're going to develop and what you're going to try and what's going to be new in your experiences going forward.
And it is scary. There's no doubt about it. And it's scary for me, but I'm not going to let the scariness blind me or paralyze me to being able to do whatever needs to be done. My job is to continue to do the things that I've chosen to do. And I think life is all about choices, and choosing not to let fear stop me is part of that process. So it is important to be able to work through whatever comes along. I expect even if I live another 100 years, it will be scary doing stuff that I used to do with Karen, and I'm perfectly okay with that, since I also know I'll be able to do it and work through it. And life is an adventure, and I really look forward to seeing what we're going to see over the next 10 and 20 and 30 years. I think that a lot of things are going to happen if we would allow ourselves to work together, work as a community, and stop just deciding that it's just us for ourselves and no one else. And if we would just choose to work together and find ways to interact and help each other, then I think we're going to have a much more powerful world. But it's all about an adventure. Life has been an adventure from the first time anybody had any conscious thought. And I think that is going to continue. And that's what makes life so much fun, no matter what happens and what gets thrown at us. God, I really do believe, doesn't give us anything that we can't handle. But having lost Karen, I can see where people can give up, and I can see where that's probably really easy to do. Fortunately, I've made the choice that I won't let that be the way I live my life. And I think that, as emotional as it is to have lost Karen after 40 years together, now I know that she would want me to continue to treat everything we do as an adventure and find ways to do things. I want to take another cruise sometime. I'm not sure how all that's going to work because it won't be with her, physically speaking. I'm not sure that I'm one of those people that would just go on a cruise by myself. I know people who have done it. I don't know. I might. Time will tell. That's a question yet to answer, but I'd like to take another cruise or two and do some other traveling outside of business. Accessibility is in Israel. I haven't been there yet. I'm looking forward to doing that and hope that we get to do that soon. And again, that will be an adventure in so many different ways. So it is all about adventure. It is all about working through things as we go. And it's also about recognizing that we're only stoppable if we allow ourselves to be, or we are as unstoppable as we want to be.
Absolutely. Did Karen have some inspiration in your unstoppable mindset? Is there a phrase that she liked to use that you're hearing in the back of your mind as you continue on?
I think it's absolutely that. She and I worked out Unstoppable Mindset as a title together.
Mm.
And because I wanted to try to come up with something a little bit different. And she may have actually been the first one to say, why don't you use Unstoppable? I think it's starting to be overused, but it wasn't when we started this whole concept. Accessibility had done a commercial, an advertisement last year about the product, and they had people in that, a number of people who happened to have disabilities, and they used the term, but uh, I I thought about Unstoppable, and I went to myself, and Karen also said, it's really what this is all about. And so you should use it. So it is one of the things that I remember that we talked about. One of my favorite times with Karen in terms of something where she taught me something, or as I said, I think sometimes she's smarter than I. I was looking for a job in 1989, and I mentioned that I went to work for a company. This is the company that sent me eventually to New York. When I was applying for jobs, and we found this one in the newspaper, I said to Karen, do I say in my cover letter I'm blind or not? And she said, you're a dummy. Only wives can do that. And I said, well, why do you say that? And she said, you've been a sales manager now for a long time. You've hired people and worked with a number of people. You took a Dale Carnegie sales course when you first started in sales. What's the most important thing that you tell every salesperson that you hire? And I wasn't really quite with her. I was thinking of a number of things. And so I finally said, I just give up which one. And she said, you've always told me that the most important thing you've ever told your people is turn perceived liabilities into assets. And that's absolutely true. What's blindness if not a perceived liability? It's not a liability. People think it is, but something is too expensive. That's a perceived liability if you can make the case for why it is what it is. Well, she said that, and I went off and I wrote a cover letter about my desire to work for this company. And the last two paragraphs of the cover letter kind of went something like this. The most important thing that you need to know about me when you're considering me for this job is that I happen to be blind. And I choose, by the way, the words happen to be blind because it's just a characteristic like being left-handed or male or female or anything else. I won't include politicians in that whole characteristic thing because they made that choice, which lowers their level, but we won't go there. It's fun to pick on politicians. Anyway, the most important thing that you need to know is that I happen to be blind. As a blind person, I've had to sell all of my life just to be able to survive and function. I've had to sell to convince somebody to let me buy a house. I've had to sell to convince somebody to let me rent an apartment or take my guide dog into stores, because this was before the Americans with Disabilities Act and there was real legislation about all that. I've had to sell to do most anything that I wanted to accomplish. So when you're considering me for this job and you're looking at other people, think about, do you want to hire somebody who just comes in to the office and works for 8 or 10 hours a day and then goes home because the job's over? Or do you want to hire somebody who truly understands sales for the science and art that it is and sells 24 hours a day as a way of life? Turn perceived liabilities into assets. And the result of that was, and the result was that 2 weeks later, I got a call from the company and they said, we're having you come in simply because of that letter. And we want to meet you and we want to talk to you about working for us. Well, I went down and the rest kind of is history. But she was absolutely right. And I didn't catch it. I was too much in the habit of always worrying about, do I say I'm blind or I'm not? And she was smart enough to recognize what really needed to be done, which is something that she did so often. And I will miss that, but I will also remember all the things that she did do. So hopefully I will work at being better.
Yeah, that love and support. It just points out some of those pieces that we overlook. Can you tell me a little bit more about what her love and support meant for you?
Really, I can only say it meant everything. We really did not only depend on each other physically because she could do things I couldn't, like she could read, and I did things she couldn't, like push the wheelchair. So she reads, I push. But just we learned each other totally, and we learned what we needed to do at any given time to support each other. There were very, very few times where both of us were down or very unhappy at the same time. I remember once when I got the job working for the company I just talked about, we were moving from Mission Viejo, California to the area of Carlsbad, California, Vista, California, which is down near San Diego, about 45, 50 miles south of where we lived in Mission Viejo. And we decided to find property and build a house, but we didn't want to continue to drive all the way down every morning for me to go to work and then Karen to come back up and go to work. So we decided that we would rent an apartment, and we found an apartment to rent. It was actually in a new facility that was going up. And we put our home in Mission Viejo on the market. And the realtor that we first used was doing some pretty shifty sorts of things. And um, he was letting people come in on their own without being present and looking at the house and giving them keys and other things that we didn't like. We caught him at it one day when we were about to move. And we went down to move into the apartment only to find out that they didn't have the certificate of occupancy yet. So we couldn't move in. That was probably one of our saddest days together because we were looking forward to being able to move down. And I don't remember whether we went back home or what we did because we had packed most everything up and physically we couldn't just go sleep on the floor. But we worked through it, but it was a very sad time. And we've had a couple of those sad times. And of course, I mentioned earlier about me making the decision that we needed to move to New York and then having to work to bring Karen along. And that was pretty sad. But again, um, she recognized the value of it. And when she made some decisions at times, I recognized the value of it. Her love meant everything to me, and I would do anything that she needed me to do. She has been a quilter since 1994, and over the last few years, she needed to replace some sewing machines, and some new ones came on the market. And I said, "You need it? Go get it." She said, "Well, we don't necessarily have a lot of money." I said, "But do you need it? Is it going to make your job and your life easier?" And she said, "Yeah, it will. I've thought about that a lot." And I said, "There's no question. Go do it." I would do anything like that for her. And I wouldn't hesitate at all because I would do whatever she needed. And I knew that she would do the same sort of thing for me. We knew each other that well that we had that deep level of trust that we needed to have. And we never were suspicious of each other. We didn't mislead each other. We didn't lie to each other, which was important.
I feel called to ask you to use those same words on yourself as you go forward, and remember that, she would do anything for you, and you should do everything for yourself that she would.
I agree. And I'm doing that at the same time. Well, so I for several years since we moved in, we have a TV in our living room and we have a Sonos sound bar. And I've always wanted to get a subwoofer because I like bass. Not loud, but I still like bass helping to fill the room. And I never wanted to spend the money to get it. And it was only after she passed that I had a bright idea. Um, the credit card I use for business accumulates rewards. And so I called the company that deals with all that. And it turns out they sold the Sonos subwoofer that I wanted to buy. So I got it for free. So
Nice.
now I have the subwoofer. Unfortunately, Karen's not here to hear it. And, she said, "Do you really need it?" And I said, "Well, it would be nice. Do I need it? No." Now, my only justification is it didn't cost anything. So I did it, and she would have approved of that. But you're right. I need to do what I need to do to move forward as well. And I will always think, Karen, is this the right decision to make? And I think that's important to do, to really think about any decision that we make, especially major life decisions. Several people have asked me already, well, are you going to move? Are you going to stay where you are? And one person has even advised that we should sell the wheelchair accessible van that Karen drove. And the answer to moving is absolutely not. Why would I want to? The house is probably bigger than I need. Well, it is bigger than I need because two of us lived in it. But at the same time, it's a very comfortable house. The interest rate is great. And I would never find another place that will be as comfortable as this. More important, I'll never find a place that I can move into that would be as comfortable and as inexpensive as this. And even as far as selling the van, um, we'll explore it, but I'm not deeply in a hurry to sell it, because if I do, I still want to have access to a vehicle. I'll need to own something because as I need to move around, whether it's the people who worked for Karen as her caregivers who now work for me in the business, or other people, I don't want them to have to use their car, and they're more reluctant to use their car if I have a vehicle available. And I learned that in college. So whether it's the van or something else, I want to have a vehicle around, but I don't need to make any urgent decisions. And I am a firm believer that things will happen as they should. I believe that God has given us the ability to make choices and has given us the ability to hear what the right decision is. We just need to learn to listen to that voice and make the right decisions. And when we do that, things will work out fine.
Those are beautiful words. They certainly seem to be having a role and an impact in the way you're handling the loss. It is remarkable. I know you've been processing for a while, but you seem to be really at ease with where things are at. Do you have advice that you would like to share with others on that in that regard?
I think it's important that people really do think about how to prepare for unexpected life changes. And that's what we'll be talking about in A Guide Dog's Guide to Being Brave. One of the things that I learned in college was to step back and think about each day at the end of the day. How did it go? What went well? What didn't go well? And even with what went well, could it have gone better? Or the things that didn't go well, what do we do so that that won't happen again? It took me a long time to get out of the habit of saying, I made a mistake, I screwed up, and that's all there is to it, to saying, okay, that didn't work like it should. I could even call it a mistake. But the ultimate question is, what do I learn to move on, and not do that same thing again, or to move forward and not do that same thing again? Or how would I handle the situation the next time it comes up? And a lot of times that happens. Something will happen again. And the question is, have I learned to the point where when it does, I would go, oh, wait a minute. I know what I did wrong on that, or I know what I should have done better. And I can make that become part of my life, which helps a lot to alleviate the fear. So that's one thing, is to be introspective at the end of the day and be mindful and allow yourself to recognize that there are things that maybe you didn't do as well as you should. I like the concept that failure isn't really failure. It's just a lesson that'll move you to more success and move you to do something better the next time. A mistake is only something that didn't work out quite as well as you want, and you can move forward from it. It's not a mistake if you did what you felt was the right thing and it turned out not to be the right thing if you learn from it. It's absolutely a mistake if you just continue to do the same thing and you don't learn from the things that happen in your life. I love Einstein's definition of insanity, which is always do the same thing and expect something different to happen. It doesn't work that way. So we can learn how to change. For me, the first time I think I really used that well was I was the program director of our radio station at KUCI in Irvine. And I heard a lot of DJs on the air, and a lot of them didn't sound as well as they could have, I didn't think. And so I came up with this bright idea. I want you all to listen to yourselves. I want you to make a recording of the times that you talk on the air and then take it and listen to it. And you can imagine that people just rebelled at that. People say we're our own worst critics. And that's really the wrong thing to say. We're not our own worst critics. We are our own best evaluators because we know all the things that go into a decision that we make. So for me, when I made that suggestion to people and they resisted, we fixed it. I got our station engineer to put a recorder in a locked cabinet, which we had in all the studios. And whenever the microphone was clicked to on, so people were gonna talk, the recorder would start. And at the end of the week, because we did it once a week, we gave each person, here's a term you haven't heard in a while, a cassette with their program on it. We said, listen to it. You know what? The people who did it, and we kind of really made everyone do it. I didn't go so far as to embarrass someone in front of other people, but I pushed really hard and got people to listen to it. It was amazing how much better everyone was by the end of the year. Some of the people went on to professional radio, and everyone benefited a lot from it. And I learned that it's all about evaluating yourself. So even today, when I give a speech, I listen to it. When I do a podcast, I go back and listen to the podcast every time I do an interview. One, because I want to refresh my mind before making the notes. But two, I want to hear how I sound. And I hope that every time I do that, I improve a little bit so that I sound a little bit better than I did the previous time. I think it's important that we allow ourselves to evaluate ourselves and to grow from that. So it's a lot of fun to do it. I've made some serious mistakes over the years. I did a couple of flubs in radio that I wouldn't say they were embarrassing, but I've listened to them actually a couple times since, and I laugh at them, but I'll never make the same kind of error in judgment again. I was going to say make the same mistake. I suppose you can say it was, but it's all about, do we learn from life? And my belief is that we have to learn from life. And life may be a great adventure, but it's also a wonderful teacher if we allow it to be. So for me, I think it's important that we all be very introspective at the end of every day. We need to think about what we did. How did that go? Especially when something happens that makes us afraid. We need to then go back and study it. Why are we afraid? What is it that's really fearful? And how do we deal with that? Those are the kinds of things that along the way I learned that helped me not be afraid on September 11th. And it really got to the point where I finally said to myself as we were going down the stairs, because I was listening for every creaking groan in case the building decided to just suddenly fall. Hey, if it's going to fall, it's going to fall. There's nothing I can do about it. I can only do what I can do. And literally went down the stairs with that attitude. So again, I chose not to be afraid. I chose to use my concerns to be more observant and to work to help other people and to be positive and upbeat all the way down the stairs. And I think we all can do that. We don't need to let fear blind us, as I describe it. We can use it as a very powerful motivator to help guide us and direct us into whatever it is that we need to do. I think that's kind of probably the most important lesson I can give to people.
Yes. Wow. And quite literally in your story, you took control of the one thing you could control, which was one step in front of the other, and it got you all the way to safety.
Right. You know, and the other part about that is you don't worry about the things that you can't control. That happens so much. I mean, we see so much on TV and so much other things in our lives that go on There's so many things that people want us to worry about, but do we have any control over all of it? No, we don't.
Mhm.
And so the bottom line is, if we focus on all that stuff, we're going to be scattered. If we worry about what we can control and let the rest of it alone, then we'll be able to move forward in a much more positive way. And we'll be better for it. And so will everyone else.
Mhm.
And if the time comes, one of my favorite examples is the whole political arena right now. Everyone's worried about what's going to happen in our US Congress and what's going to happen with the country and what's going to happen with one thing or another. And do we have any control over it? Well, we do when we have elections. And if we really look at all of our politicians, all of our leaders, those who truly are and those who think they are, we can analyze them and see what they're really doing and not be afraid to make a decision that says, I've always been of a particular party, but this guy who's running from my party isn't going to really benefit us. And so I need to make a different choice and really take the position that our elections are the times that we really do have control. Once they occur, then we are bound by the decisions that are made until the next election. And so we can learn to just control the things that we have control over and then move forward. And anyone who says we don't have any control is just as misguided as the people who think they have to control everything and can't.
Mhm. Yeah, we certainly can't control when and how people come in and out of our lives. And
Right.
I've really heard from you today about honoring and valuing the time you have with people and carrying that value even in their loss.
I think it's important.
Yeah.
And, like I said, Karen will always be in my life, and I hope to get lots of opportunities to talk about her. And I talk to her, and I will continue to do that because it's kind of also my way of thinking about it and figuring out how to solve problems. And I don't have any problem with doing that as long as I recognize what it really is I'm thinking, and she may be talking back, and I will
Mhm.
probably hear some of that as we go forward, and probably have already. But it's all about thinking, and it's all about recognizing that we are capable of living meaningful, productive lives. And whether some of us have some sort of disability, whether there are things that go on that we don't have control over, if we don't, then no sense worrying about it. Deal with the things that you can influence, and you'll be much stronger and much better for it.
I love that you still talk to her. Michael, I would like to ask an intimate question, if you don't mind. You said you had the opportunity to say goodbye, surrounded by friends and family. If you're willing, did you have words you would share with us that you shared with her in your goodbye?
You know, I was with her for about an hour before she was on life support. She was on medications, and actually at 11:25, they well before that happened, the doctor came in and was talking with us, and he said she's on full life support. She's not sustaining herself, and so I said, if we discontinue the meds, what will happen? And he said she'll probably pass within an hour or two. And I said, if we keep the meds going, what will happen? And he said, probably a few days, but certainly no more than that. Well, Karen's sister also was an intensive care unit nurse and had other positions at the Kaiser hospital system. She worked there basically almost 40 years. And as I said earlier, she was in the room. And so I said, what do you think, Vicki? And she says, yeah, absolutely. And so I told the doctor, okay, let's go ahead and discontinue the meds because this isn't helping her or any of us. Um, and before that, I had said, Karen, we're here. We're gonna we're gonna support you in whatever you do. It sounds like it's time for you to go. While the meds were still being administered, actually, her brother called because I had reached out to try to get him to let him know what was going on. And I think he put it very well. He said, I think she's probably already made the transition. And I said, I agree. But I still said, we're here. You go ahead and go. And uh, we we bless you. We love you. And I'm going to do everything I can to continue to honor you and love you in any way that I can. And I hope that you'll always know that. And I think that when 11:25 came and they did discontinue the meds, was probably about another 45 or 50 minutes before her last heartbeat took place, but she had left. So it was just the medications kind of um, going away over time. And then when she left, we all just said goodbye one last time, and there was nothing else that we could do. So
Mhm.
we went out and we just talked in the hall a little bit, and then we all went our separate ways.
It does sound like a beautiful end to a beautiful story together, and one that, as you said, will continue.
It will. I believe it was beautiful. I believe that we're still experiencing very beautiful times with it. I just spent New Year's the last 3 days because, well, not the last 3 days, but the beginning of the year, Friday the 30th. Josie, who now works for me, who worked with Karen, her caregiver, was there for part of the day. But then Saturday, Sunday, and Monday, it was just me, my guide dog Alamo, and our cat Stitch. And we just all were together in the house, and that will continue to happen. So at least I have company and they have company. And I think that everyone misses Karen, but we all have recognized that it's now the three of us as a close-knit family. And so Stitch the cat walks on me at night when I'm in bed. Alamo thinks he's a lap dog and wants to sit in my lap all the time, but he's a great guide dog. And, we are all together and do the things that we need to do as a family. And it doesn't matter whether it's a dog and a cat and a person, or it's more than one person, we're still the family, and that's okay.
Michael, I'm in awe of your big heart, and your unstoppable mindset. I am very honored to have been here with you today to hear your stories and learn more about your journey with Karen. Um, Thank you so much for having me and for sharing all of this with us. It's an
Well,
honor.
thank you. Thank you. And I really appreciate you being here and being able to talk with us about this. And if people are listening to this, we will put the Zoom link in the podcast notes so that if they want to come and if they knew Karen or just want to come and listen, they're welcome to do that as well. And so we'll have that in there. And I hope that people will go buy Thunderdog because they'll learn a lot about Karen from Thunderdog. It's available wherever books can be found, and that'll be another way that they can um, also help honor Karen. But I think that they'll learn about a wonderful person, a person who's contributed a lot, not necessarily in always the most visible ways on this earth, but who in fact contributed a lot and will continue to do that just by all the things she did and the memories she left us. So I really appreciate you being here, Braden, to help with it. And I hope that people will listen to this. And of course, we always ask for a 5-star rating, and I hope that that will happen and that people will recognize that they can be unstoppable too, which is what we really need.
Beautifully said.
Well, thank you again. And I really appreciate you asking some wonderful questions. And they help me think and they help me process, which is also important. But most of all, they give me the opportunity to talk about this. And that's the most important thing that I can do because that will help me live a better life. So thank you.
You're welcome.